In this video, we'll be looking at how you can update and manage your assets in the runtime with the help of the Create Object and Change Component buttons. So let's take a look at what you need to do in order to accomplish this. First, let's create a new mimic so we can look at these controls. Next, I'll go to the toolbox and locate the Data Management group and expand it. Then I'll select the Create Object button and draw one out on the design surface. Now that we have our button, we can configure it by going to the Properties tab and finding the Setup property. This dialog is where you'll set all of the parameters you need for creating a new object. So let's take a look at these parameters now. The first option is the New Object Type. This is the type of object you want to create when you click the button. When you click the button for this option, it will bring up another dialog listing all of the types in your model. When you've selected the type you want, you can click the OK button to set this as the type you want to create. Next, you have the New Object Name. This will be the display name of the object you're going to be creating. At first, you'll notice that the drop-down area is disabled. This is because of the current naming option being set to Auto. If you select Fixed, you can then enter a name that you want the object to be called where the drop-down was. In some cases, you may have a text box located on your design surface that you want to use to name objects. If there are any available, this text box option will be enabled. We'll come back to this in a moment. The type path is where you want your new object to be created. Clicking on the button will open a dialog that you can use to browse through your model. In my case, I'm going to select the Assets view, then click OK. Finally, we have the document to open. As you can see, this is an optional parameter that will choose a mimic to open when the object is created. It's used for scenarios where you might be adding something that requires properties to be manually set. In cases like this, you'd have a templated mimic that you'd use for entering this information. So let's go back to that text box name parameter we talked about. I'll go ahead and click the OK on this dialog so we can save the other parts of this and we can get back to our design surface. Next, I'll add a data text box to the canvas. Then I'll select my button again and open the Setup dialog one more time. Notice how the text box option is now enabled. If I select it, the drop-down menu becomes enabled and will list any text box controls that we have on our canvas. If I select the text box, I can then set that as the source of the name for any objects that are created from this button. Now our button is configured and ready to be used, so let's try it out. Before we launch the runtime though, let's quickly look at the assets in the Data Model Designer. So I'll open it now, then click the Connect button and wait for it to log in. Next I'll switch to the Assets tab, then expand the Assets view so we can see what's in here. We currently have one asset called Tank001. So let's go back to the Mimic Designer and launch the Runtime Client. I'll save this mimic in the Mimics view, then click OK. Then click the Connect button and wait for it to log in. For the name of this new asset, I'll enter something like Tank002. Then I'll click the button to create it, and we can see that a message has popped up saying we've successfully created the object. I'll then click OK and close the runtime. Now let's go back to our Model Designer again. To see the changes, the Model Designer needs to be refreshed. You can do this by going to the File menu option called Designer, then selecting the Refresh option. Now if I expand the Assets view, we can see that we now have a second asset in here called Tank002. Next, let's talk about changing components. Changing components on an asset allows you to modify the different pieces of an asset. For example, if you had an asset with a user component that served as owner information or a technical contact, you'd want to be able to update this in your system if you needed to. With the help of the Change Component button, you can quickly and easily do this at runtime. Before we set this up, we need to make one small change to our model, so let's do this now. On the tank type, we need to add a component to it. This can be done by selecting it, then switching to the Components tab. Next, I'll click the Add Component button and check System Types. For this demonstration, I'm going to find the Users type and select it. I'll call this something like Technical Contact, then press OK to add it to our type. Next, we'll need to add this component on the asset itself. So let's switch to the Assets tab and select the Tank001 asset. If we expand this, we can see that Technical Contact is now available, but it isn't created, so I'll go ahead and right-click on this, then choose Add Existing Asset. Next, I'll select my administrator account and press OK. Now we can go back into our Mimic Designer and take a look at the button. Before we continue though, I want to reiterate that this does not have to be limited to user types and that this component change can be used however you see fit. I chose to show user types in particularly because they do a good job of showing how this component change can benefit you. So now I'm going to go into my toolbox and find a Change Component button. I'll draw it out on my design surface. Then I'll switch to the Properties tab and open the Setup dialog. As you've noticed, both of these paths can be relative. Since we don't need anything to be relative for this demonstration, I'll uncheck both of these so we can move on. The first option we'll look at is the Component Property path. This is the path to the specific component you want to change. Clicking the button will open a dialog where you can browse through your model to find a component. In our case, I'm going to be using the Technical Contact on Tank001. The next option we'll look at is the Available Items path. This is going to be a list of matching component types you want to be able to choose from. Clicking on this button will also show a dialog. Here you can choose the collection of types you want to use. For our demonstration, I'm going to select the Users collection. This button is now configured and ready to be used in the runtime. So I'll go ahead and click the Test Run button, then click Connect and wait for the Mimic to load. When I click the button, you'll see that it's presented us with a dialog where we can choose a new component. I can then choose any of the users listed in this collection and set them as my technical contact. Since we had Administrator set before, I'll choose Engineering, then click OK. Now, if I go back to my Model Designer and refresh it again, I can expand the assets and open the Tank001 asset and see that the technical contact is now set to the engineering user. In closing, Status Enterprise is a powerful, easy-to-use tool that lets you design once and deploy multiple times. For more information about Status Enterprise, please visit us on the web at www.b-Scada.com.